Okay, so I've been trying to beat Isabel now for a long time, and I have finally cracked it as a roughly 800 elo player, and that's being generous to me, thinking I'm better than my actual score is. But I start off, and I like to play a London system, so I'm just going to develop normally, protect the pawn there that he's threatened, get everything in, try and be nice and principled, push that pawn on the outside, just protect it, otherwise his queen will come straight down and take it. And then again, just try and develop normally in this London system, get out the bishop, get out the knight, get my queen, try and get all my pieces activated. And this is where I sort of went to fall into my first trap, was I realised my bishop here is kind of in a struggle and in a pin, because if I keep it where it is, the pawn will take it on the next go. If I move it back a square, he can either take with his knight, which will upset my pawn structure when I take back, or he'll just continue pushing pawns in his next moves and it will be trapped. I then thought, though, I can just put the pressure back, put his queen under pressure. He pushed the pawn, and at which point I was like, right, let's just do a little trade then. Can't take all my pieces at the same time. Take his knight, he takes my bishop. I'll then slide my other bishop back. He is a pawn up, or Isabel, should I say, is a pawn up at this point. Slides down and takes that pawn. There's nothing really I can do about it. And I try and take back, but then again, I'm still a pawn down. And now he's got my queen pinned to my king. Not ideal. However, slide that back up. And now we're even again. Well, I say even, I'm a pawn down. But what I can do then is threaten his rook. And we're simplifying, which isn't really in my interest, but it's also not the end of the world. Until this moment when, instead of moving their knight to safety, my opponent decides, well, she actually can't move it to safety. So you've got that square on f2, in which I'd take, or the square in g3, which I'd take. So at that point, I've got them pinned, take the knight. They've then taken a couple of pawns in the meantime, but my knight will just take straight back. And this is then the next section where alarm bells really started to ring. If you look at their bishop up on g7, they have a diagonal line down that pins both my knight and my rook. I've got to do something about this. So the smartest move, and where I think my chess has really come on since the last time I featured on this channel, was I just didn't panic, just slid the rook out the way, guarding the knight, which meant if they took with their bishop, I could just take straight back. However, you see, to sort of counter that, black then double puts pressure, so not just from the bishop, but also from the rook at the back, and is really targeting and trying to win that square on c3. However, in a move that not many people really give enough credit for, you can use your king to take pieces back. So that's exactly what I did, sliding up to d2. It meant that if some sort of play happened where they took with a bishop and then they took with a rook, I could take back with a rook and then take with a king. Wow, that's a mouthful. I'm not really sure what Isabel was thinking there, sliding the king across, but you know what? Let's let it be. I then realised I could push up, and because I'm now a pawn up, it's now in my interest to simplify and take pieces off the board. So that's exactly what I did. I came over here and I took out their light square bishop, which is like a really defining factor of the game. I have a light square bishop, they don't. I'm now in control of those squares. So the first thing I go to do is move my bishop up, and the idea was to get them onto g4, targeting both that doubled pawn and the rook behind. She sees it pretty early on and moves her rook out the way, but there's not much she could do about her pawn because I would have just taken it anyway with my pawn on f4 if she had to move forwards, so I can just slide around the back and take that. She responds by getting her other pawn to safety and threatening my knight simultaneously, so I get my knight out the way, move him across to the side. He then takes my rook, and as I said, you can always take back with the king, don't forget that. Now we're in this position, entering an endgame, and I'm at 2 points of material up. Get my knight to safety, and it's now just about simplifying. Reroute that bishop round the back, start taking pawns. Again, they tried to threaten my pawn in the middle. It's all in my interest just to take things off the table at this point. Because if we took piece for piece, I would end up ultimately on top. And that's kind of what I did here as well. I moved my knight out the way to safety. They took a pawn at the bottom. But I knew that once they took that pawn, I could then just take back. My pawn on the b file now has an open route to promote to a queen, which is ultimately how I went on to win the game. From here, there's not much he can do to stop me taking his pawn. Again, he can delay the process slightly by threatening my knight, but I move my knight out the way like so, and there's nothing he can do. I'll gobble that up. And I was a little bit worried about his pawn on the h file and how it was going to get me. But then, luckily, my light square bishop, like I said, coming in clutch, covers that whole thing as soon as he promotes, or as soon as Isabel promotes even. Got it protected. Protect the bishop with a knight, which I realised I didn't even have to do because I can just slide my bishop to the other side of the table, and there's really not much Isabel can do about it at this point. The game is pretty pretty sewn up. Although it didn't stop me having a bit of a brain fart, I decided to go after his bishop and his pawn to try and free up my bishop, when I realised, in actual fact, I can just come back, check his king, slowly march his king back up the board. Isabel promotes, I'll just take the queen, there's not much Isabel can do now. Check again, moving my pawn forwards. I forgot here my knight was unprotected, which wasn't that helpful. However, the pawn was always protected by the bishop back on h1. He was definitely getting MVP. Isabel then did potentially the worst move she could have done, and she moved her bishop off of that diagonal, which would have stopped me promoting. And really that kind of blundered her the game. Like, there was a chance she could have drawn it from there, but it wasn't to be. I got my king into the corner. There's no way they can take back. Once I'm a queen up, it was just about slowly ladder checkmating. Again, my heart was really racing at this point, so I didn't do it in the most efficient manner. But at the end of the day, I got the checkmate done. Isabel, take that. Guys, the rest of you watching, I wish you just as much luck as I have in taking her down.